This incredible story happened in the state of Virginia in the USA. Mason and Catherine got married when they were 19 years old. A month after the wedding, Ekaterina found out that she was pregnant. The young couple was overjoyed and began to prepare for the birth of their first child. A small room was equipped for the baby, providing him with a wardrobe, a small cot and toys to welcome the little newcomer. They couldn't wait to have offspring, and they were glad to soon become a small family. At that moment, they had no idea what would happen next. When it was time to give birth and Catherine urgently needed to go to the hospital, Mason called a friend to take the two of them. But his friend explained that his car had broken down and it was impossible to drive it. Then the young man became nervous and immediately called an ambulance. Unfortunately, it happened so late that Catherine completely lost consciousness, and her husband hugged her again and again and tried to calm her down. When the ambulances arrived, Ekaterina was rushed to the hospital and immediately taken to the maternity ward. Mason waited impatiently, worried about his wife and the expected child. After a while, a nurse came out and informed him that Ekaterina could not give birth naturally. An operation was necessary. This news worried him greatly. After much agitation, the doctor finally came out about 5 hours after the operation with a worried expression on his face. He sadly explained to Mason that his wife had died during the procedure, but the little boy had been saved at the last second. Mason was shocked and started screaming as loudly as he could. He couldn't believe that his beloved wife, with whom he wanted to spend the rest of his life, was gone forever and would never return. For a man, the world has collapsed. A black cloud overshadowed the life of this formerly happy man. It seemed that everything he had built so far had suddenly collapsed like a house of cards. Later, he went into the doctor's room to see his crying son, but his father did not want to see him. He refused to take the child with him. The nurses tried to calm him down and explained that they understood his grief, but now he has a great responsibility for the child. When the doctor noticed that the father was in a serious mental condition, he asked the nurses not to give him the child to avoid possible risks. Instead, he suggested Mason go home and come back in a week to pick up the baby. However, a week later, Mason did not even think about taking the child to himself. When the hospital called him and told him that he could pick up his son, he continued to explain that he did not want to see the child. The hospital staff was stunned, as they had never encountered such a situation before. When Ekaterina's grandmother found out about the incident, she did not hesitate and immediately went to the hospital. She took the baby home with her and lovingly cared for the baby. She made sure that he didn't need anything and bought him everything he needed. At first, she tried to reason with Mason and convince him to take care of his son, but he continued to refuse and ignore her efforts. 4 months later, the grandmother decided to visit the man with the child and went to his house. But she didn't find him there. When she asked, one of the neighbors told her that he often went to the railway tracks near the forest and sat there. The worried grandmother immediately ran there to check on her granddaughter's husband. When she arrived, she saw a man sitting on the tracks with a bottle of wine in his hand. An elderly woman came up and tried to talk to him, but he didn't seem to understand anything. To be able to think and still refuse to talk. She put his baby in his lap, but he didn't answer. The grandmother lost hope of changing the man's mind and decided to return to her house. A terrier cross was already waiting for her there and played with the baby every day. He was a smart young dog who loved children. Sometimes the woman said that the dog was the best father for the child. So the kid lived happily in the house with his dog and great-grandmother. The woman admitted that the father could not take care of the child, and did not try to talk to him anymore. But now the story takes an unexpected turn. About 3 months later, Mason suddenly appears at the door of an elderly woman. He explains to her that he wants to have a child and raise it himself. He came to terms with his wife's death and took control of his mental health problems. Now he was ready to start a new life. At first, the woman could not believe that the man had changed so much in such a short time. But she was happy that he finally wanted to take control of his life again. In the end, she let him take the baby home and helped arrange everything. Then she said goodbye to the child in tears. In the following time, she visited her grandson every day and was amazed at how hard her father tried. He even met a new woman named Olivia. She seemed nice, and the older woman thought that she would suit Mason, and thought that the child was now in safe hands and could grow up happily in the family. But later it turned out how wrong she was. One day, sitting in her garden, Grandma noticed that her beloved dog was no longer there. He probably crawled through a small hole in her fence that she had wanted to fix for a long time. When she was about to go in search of a lost dog, he ran around the corner to the house. The woman was glad that her dog returned home safe and sound. But she quickly noticed that something was wrong. Because the dog didn't come back alone. He was holding something in his mouth. As he approached, the woman realized that this was the little child of her deceased granddaughter. She was confused and immediately picked up the baby in her arms. Then she immediately went to Mason. When she arrived, she didn't hesitate to call the police. The young man was questioned at the police station and confessed everything without question. You won't believe what the police have heard. It turned out that his girlfriend Olivia broke up with him a few days ago. He couldn't handle it and fell back into a deep hole. He started drinking again and, from his point of view, found himself in a desperate situation. His seemingly new stage of happiness and hope in life turned into a nightmare. Then he took the child and went with him to the tracks. He put it there and went home again. He did not want to have a child anymore and thus solve his problem. Then, in his own home, he planned to do the unthinkable. However, no one could guess what happened next. Meanwhile, the elderly woman's dog ran away from home and went to the child. He must have sensed that something was wrong. He ran to the rails, while his master, unsuspecting, was sitting at home in the garden. Although he had never been there before, he found the child. Then he carefully grabbed the boy by his clothes, pulled him off the rails and then returned him to the owner. Because he knew she would take care of the baby. The woman was shocked, and when her granddaughter's husband did not answer the phone, she realized that something was wrong. When the elderly woman later arrived at the man's house, he was going to do the unthinkable, but she managed to prevent it and call the police. Later, they took the man to the police station and questioned him. The officials were shocked, and the rest of the city's residents couldn't believe it when this story became known. Today, the child lives with his great-grandmother and her dog and grows up happily, without fear that something will happen to him again. If this story touched you as much as it touched us, you should watch this video. A crying elephant begs a man for help. You won't believe what happened next. Click here to get the full story.